I'm right from north of Brieux is where I was born, on the Saskatchewan River, 16 miles north of Brieux. Dad had a farm down there, and we farmed, and ever since I was a little wee kid, can barely remember, I was going to be a cowboy. That's, you know. And when I got a little older, my mom says, well, you know, there's no cowboys anymore. That's just a thing of the past. And so when I was old enough to quit school, I had a job in Alberta on a ranch, and we were on it was 86 sections, the first one I rode on, and there was no roads in it. You had to cover the thing. And the first field outside of the gate was a township, 36 sections. When you rode out of that gate, you were into one field of 36 sections. And then all the smaller fields of 10, 12 sections were on the outside of that, so you had to ride across that thing every time you went to one of the smaller fields. And that's how I got into this, is because when we lived north of Medicine Hat there, it was 90 miles to Medicine Hat, and if you broke something, 90 miles was a long trip. So then I kind of started piddling and fixing things myself, you know. But as soon as you do that, then somebody else will come along, well, could you fix this for me, or can you fix that for me? You know, so it kind of went from bad to worse. And when it was, I think, 1982 or 83, I had ordered a saddle in Alberta, and the guy couldn't get the tree I wanted, so the winter went by, and so the next winter I decided to make my own then. And I rode it for a while, and then a guy that used to work for me, he runs a pasture over east here now, he's seen it, and well, could you try one for me? So I made one for him, and then it kind of went from bad to worse there, because pretty soon I was building saddles all the time. And I was running a bull station, so in the wintertime I'd do the bull chores, and because we had 180 bulls or something. So we'd feed them, and then I'd build saddles at night or during the day when I wasn't shoring. And if I'm building a working saddle, I'd like to talk the guys into staying away from anything high, because if you get a horn that's like a high front and a horn that's way up here, well, you've got a long ways off of that, especially if something hits you out to the side. Puts a lot of torque on the horse's withers. And they can also pull a lot more if your pull is right down close to the withers, if you're pulling straight away, you know, because they haven't got it way up here pulling, they've got it way down here. So the only disadvantage, when you're doing a lot of dragging calves, like I used to do a lot of branding and dragging calves, it would just about wear your leg out, because everything's so low it rides over your leg here. I can show you the difference between a saddle tree that don't fit. This is actually a draft tree, and it's very wide, and you see how it's hitting right up in here because it's so flared. But look at here, it's not touching your horse at all. And that's one that like don't fit at all. And you notice here the back of because draft horses are very flat on the back, and this is all hollow under. I can run my hand right under, so there's nothing under there. Like, it just totally don't fit, and that's the way a lot of the saddle trees fit a horse, because they got too much dip in their back. And it sits really low here, you see. It would actually hurt their wither if you sat on there, because it would keep pushing back. When they're so wide, they'll keep pushing back like this. And if you see your saddle wanting to have that look to it, you know that they're too wide in here. Whereas a normal tree that would fit that horse will sit up. It's still a very low tree, but you notice how it just fits, and it fills in here, and you can't stick your hand in here, and they just fit like nice. They sit on there nice, and compared to one that's just too wide. And if you get the one that's too narrow, they'll want to dig in on the corners like this because they're too narrow, and they'll be. So I always ask people, now where is it soring the horse, up high or down low? Because if it's up here, then that means it's flared too much, and if it's down here, it's not flared enough, and it's too narrow bars. And you can get them too narrow in here too, and people will pad up thinking they're getting the problem fixed, but all it does is make it narrower because the pads just take up more space. When I'm saddled up, if I can get my fingers under flat like that, I'm happy. This is Rhonda's, and it fits them really nice. And I always say when a saddle fits a horse nice and slaps on like that, you should be almost able to step onto that horse without, you see, I can almost pick myself off the ground with no cinch or nothing on. And it just fits on there. And because it just fits them, you know. One year a guy came up from Moose Jaw and he had an old saddle. And he heard I rebuilt saddles. And he had an original Northwest mounted police saddle. And he brought it up and it had enough parts on it that I could take a pattern off of and make it back to original. So I tore it right down and the tree was excellent in it. And I rebuilt it back to original and sent it back, and he rode it for several years. But I don't rebuild too many old saddles. And the reason being, I talk people out of it if they want to use them, because the old saddles are really narrow, and you just don't find horses like that anymore, so they don't fit anything. So I talk people out of rebuilding them to use, because you won't find a horse that fits. And even when I started, you know, I was building on semi-quarter horse bars. And the horses have changed so much now that I'm building pretty well everything on quarter horse bars, because the horses are just widened out. Well, I started riding this saddle in '63. I bought it brand new. And you know what happened? The first day I rode this saddle, I was working on a ranch in Alberta, and I was riding their old stud horse, and I had to lead a colt across the road. He was a yearling. And so I got across the other side, and this colt was kind of ripping around, so I just flipped a half hitch over the horn and on this old stud, and I hadn't used the saddle before, and I hadn't really tightened it up that much, and this whole stud would buck. And I got off to open the gate, and that colt, he got the rope under the horse's tail, and that old stud, he just blew the cork. And of course my latigo started stretching out, and I didn't have it very tight to start with, and he bucked and he pulled that saddle right off over his back legs, and there the colt went. It was in a long laneway for a mile, and then it opened up into 2 or 3 sections. And the colt went down that mile dragging this brand new saddle. He'd never been on a horse before. And when he got out to where he'd go into the big pasture, he hooked on the gate post, the corner post, and there he was when I jumped on the old stud bareback and went down, and I rescued my saddle in it. And it's still got all the scratches, you know, and you can see them all over here, barbed wire, and that's from that episode. And the only thing that broke was, it broke this billet. So, but the rest of it was just beat up, banged up. That was my break-in of this saddle. But it's still going, you know, you don't... For years and years I'd done just the leather work. And then, actually, I don't remember, it must be close to 18, 20 years ago now that I started doing silver work. I had ordered a horn cap for a guy for Christmas, for his girlfriend or something. And so I sent to Alberta and got it made, and it come back, and it was the wrong size. Well, and we had this happen a few times. We ordered something and it come back, I think it had the wrong initials on. And so I had a friend that's a silversmith, and so I went and seen him and I thought, well, like, what does it take to get, just so I can make a horn cap or something like that, you know? And so he said, well, he said, come and spend 2 or 3 days with me and I'll show you what you need. So I did, and he showed me the tools I would need to do that, and he says, now go home and practice, and he kind of showed me how he engraved. So I'm practicing, and that's like 20 years ago, and I'm still practicing, but but then it's went from bad to worse with that, because I do more silver now than I ever do leather. I even do earrings, but I don't tell anybody because I don't want to be known as an earring maker. But you got to use your scrap silver up somewhere. So I'm really cautious when I tell people that. We're really fussy with our bits, and we've been really lucky with our bits. We keep a whole line of just plain working bits. And we started with the snaffles, and what I really found with bits is we found sweet iron, which is impossible to find anymore, is real sweet iron, and I happened to run onto a bunch of it, and so I bought the whole thing. It's not a expensive iron or anything. It's just that they don't make it because it's just a kind of almost a garbage iron. And it's got no carbon in it. But horses like it. This goes in their horse's mouth, like this, and goes up to the bridle. And a snaffle would bend right off. I'm not a big fan of a snaffle on colts if you're two-hand them, because they will bend right off. And so then I designed this one because he wanted his students to have something that wouldn't just bend right off. So we designed this thing, and it locks off there. And then you get into the shanks. A lot of people come and they're in a snaffle and they want to go to something like really mild. So I designed this one. We've sold a lot of them, and horses just like them. I say they're so balanced I can set them on the end of a pen, and so then I take this, and I usually do it with a real fancy silver bit, you know, because they really show off at a trade show. I'll take a fancy silver bit and I'll just set it on there. And ours, you know, we always say, well, try it, you know, and if your horse don't like it, bring it back. But we've never really, can't say I've ever got one back. So when I started like fixing bridles, and the only thing I shied away from was everybody come, well, can you fix my boots? And I always, no, I don't do mitts, I don't do boots. And to this day, I still say the same thing, I won't do boots. Because they think, well, because I can sew leather, I can fix boots, but no.
If you have program ideas that you'd like to see on Local On Demand, write us at max.local@sasktel.com. Max Local programming is now available online at maxonline.sasktel.com.